Welcome to Soothe Quiet Sleep. I'm so glad you are here. Before we begin our tonight's story, find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into the surface beneath you. Your shoulders can soften now. Your hands can rest. If your eyes are not already closed, allow them to close gently. Take a slow breath in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth. One more time. Breathe in and breathe out. Tonight, we step quietly into a small study room in a village house south of Chang'an mountains. A few days' journey from the great capital of Chang'an. The warm amber light of late summer afternoon rests on a wooden desk while a village scholar Tutor reads softly from the classic of poetry. The village sits in a wide valley south of the mountains. Fields of late summer grain extend along the valley floor. Their stalks, heavy and golden, bending slightly in the afternoon warmth. The hills on either side are green and close. Their slopes covered in bamboo and pine. The tree line softening into pale haze, where the heat still lingers above the ridge. Inside the house, the day has grown quiet. The gate in the outer wall is closed. The courtyard garden beyond the study door is still. A few bamboo canes standing in their fixed places near the low garden wall. Their leaves barely moving. The stone water basin in the corner holding a dark, motionless reflection of the sky. Through the paper lattice window on the western wall, the sound of cicadas drift inside. Not loud, not close, a steady, layered sound. Rising slowly, reaching a full, even hum, then easing back before it builds again. Simply present, without beginning or end. The tutor sits at the low wooden writing desk near the window. He is a man of middle years. His hair is gathered and pinned with a plain wooden clasp. His robe is the color of pure clay, woven soft with long use. Its sleeves folded back at the curve, as they always are in the study room. He moved back to this valley 7 years ago. after his third and final journey to the examination halls in Chang'an. The dust of that road, the crowded and anxious compound, the days he once believed his life would be measured by official seals and imperial decrees. He does not speak of that journey often. He is not a man prone to speaking of things he can't change. The years of study were not for the empire's service, but for this: to pass the rhythm of the ancients to a new generation in the shade of the quiet Qingling mountains. He is content here. The two boys come in from the courtyard. They are sandal feet, quiet on the stone path. The elder, 11, serious, with ink already on his right forefinger from the morning's practice, takes his place at the low table to the left. The younger one, he is 9 and has rounder face, still learning to sit without fidgeting. He settles beside his brother. They arrange themselves with the small ceremony of children who have done this many times. Backs straight, hands folded. A brief mutual glance that settles into stillness as they face their tutor. The tutor nods once without speaking. He turns to the wooden shelf on the north wall, where the bamboo scroll rolls stand in their row, round and ordered, each tied with a narrow cloth ribbon at the center, and labeled with a small hanging tag in brush characters. Running his fingers along the row, he finds the one he intends and draws it from its place. He carries it back to the desk, sits and unrolls it slowly between both palms. The dry bamboo surface giving a faint whisper as it opens, and the sound barely more than a breath. The scroll settles flat. The afternoon light falls across its columns of brush characters, small and black, precise. The ink slightly faded at the older passages and darker at the sections he copied himself in more recent seasons. He lays 2 smooth river stones at either end to hold the scroll open. Outside, the cicadas continue their long and hurried chorus. He reads the first line of the passage out loud. His voice is low and even, paced to the natural measure of the verse. Each character given its proper weight and length. The phrase shaped by the rhythm of the ancient poets, built into it long ago. A rhythm that does not require teaching because it is already present in the sounds themselves. He paused. The boys repeat the line together. Their voices are low, slightly uneven. The sounds still taking their shape in young mouths. The elders' pronunciation clearer, and the youngest still finding its way at the longer syllables. But the line is there, carried between them, rising and falling in the same pattern as the tutors. A brief silence. Then the second line. This is how all the afternoon lessons begin, not with explanation, but with sound. For now, there is only the hearing and the repeating, the tutor's voice, and then the voices. Between them, the cicadas outside and the faint movement of air through the paper lattice window. Warm afternoon light extends across the writing desk in a long, quiet band. Gold where it crosses the scroll's pale surface. Darker where it falls on the inkstone gray stone face at the desk upper edge. The tutor reads the third line and pause. The students repeat. Between the third and fourth passages, the tutor rests a hand on the inkstone. It sits in its place to the right of the scroll. A flat rectangular piece of gray-green stone. Its grinding surface worn smooth in a shallow depression at the center from many years of use. His father used this stone before him. The stone was old even then. He takes up the inkstick from its rest and adds 2 drops of water from the small ceramic fish on the shelf corner. Slowly, he begins to grind. The inkstick turns against the whetstone in a steady circular motion. A sound between a whisper and a grace, low and even. The ink deepens gradually in the stone's depression. First, gray, then a richer gray, then approaching the proper black that comes when the grinding has been patient enough. He does not think while he grinds. The boys wait without being told to. They are accustomed to these pauses. The small, necessary intervals between readings, when the tutor attends to some quiet tasks. They have learned, over the weeks and months of their lessons, that the silences are part of the lessons too. Outside, the cicadas rise again in their long, slow wave. The ink is ready. He lays the stick across the stone's upper edge and looks for a moment at the scroll. Then he reads the fourth passage. When the scroll is finished, he carries it back to its place on the shelf. He does this carefully, aligning it with the others, adjusting the cloth ribbon tie so it lies evenly at the center. There is no hurry. The shelf has held these scrolls for many years and will hold them for many more. Each one rests in exactly its place. He then lifts the small clay teapot from its resting stone beside the brazier in the corner. The pot is old and unglazed. Its surface, a warm dark brown, deepened by years of tea and heat. Its handle, worn smooth where his fingers have held it through many hundreds of afternoon sessions. He breaks a small piece from the compressed tea cake in its ceramic jar and drops it into the waiting water and places the pot over the coals. He sits back. The boys do not speak during these intervals. They know they may. The younger one watches the pot. Pale steam begins to rise from the teapot's narrow spout. The courtyard garden is visible through the open doorway. Bamboo canes still against the late afternoon sky. The stone basin in the far corner holding its quiet water. The afternoon light has shifted. It no longer falls at the same angle across the desk. The warm gold band has moved lower, crossing now onto the stone floor beside the table, leaving the scroll shelf in the softer, even more light that comes when the sun has descended past the direct angle. And the whole room fills with a gentler amber glow. The cicadas have eased to a quieter register. Not gone, still present, but lower and slower now, as if they too have noticed the changing of the afternoon. The tea is ready. He pours slowly from the clay pot, a thin control arc of amber liquid, into the first small celadon cup, filling it to just below the brim. Then the second cup, then a third for himself. He placed the 2 cups before the boys. The boys lift them in 2 hands. Steam rises from all 3 cups at once. 3 small columns of pale vapor that waver gently in the still air of the study, and thin into nothing before they reach the ceiling. The tutor drinks once slowly. Warm against his palms, warm through him. He rests the cup at the desk edge. He goes back to the shelf and selects a second scroll. This one is quieter. A narrow roll tied with a red cloth ribbon. He unrolls it carefully at the desk. The same quiet whisper of dry bamboo opening under his hands. The verses here are older, from the earlier sessions of the classic poetry, compiled before the Tang Dynasty, before many dynasties. Songs from the fields and rivers and village gates of an ancient wall that the tutor has been reading since he was himself younger than his elder student. Before reading the verses out loud, he takes a quiet moment with the opening lines. To himself only, not moving his lips. There is one verse he has always carried, kept not on bamboo or paper, but in the smooth interior of memory. The way certain things are kept without effort. He follows the words on the scroll anyway. He reads the line out loud and then pause. The boys repeat. The elder first, clear and steady. Then the younger one, slightly behind, catching up to the last syllable, with a small emphasis that is entirely his own. A faint breeze enters from the courtyard through the paper lattice window. It moves across the scroll's lower edge, lifting the corner just slightly, not enough to disturb the river stones at the end, and passes through the window, passes through the room without pause, carrying with it the warm, earthen smell of the garden after the afternoon's heat, and beneath that, the faint, dry, papery scent of bamboo leaves. And then it passes through. The room settles again. The tutor reads the second line. The sun has moved below the garden wall. The direct light is gone now from the study floor. In its place, the room holds an even amber glow, warm and without shadow. The particular quality of late afternoon light, when the sky is still fully bright, but the source itself is no longer visible. Everything softened and equal. The stone floor has begun to release the warmth it has held throughout the day. The inkstone on the desk is less sharp in this light. The scroll characters, which had been distinct in the direct afternoon sun, settle into a warmer, quieter tone, still clear, but gentler. The tutor reads the final verse of the second scroll. The boys repeat it together. The younger one reaches the end of the last syllabus at the same time as his brother for the first time that afternoon. The two voices arriving together at the close is small and unmarked completion. The tutor rolls the scroll close, slowly from one end to the other. He ties the red cloth ribbon carefully in a flat knot at the center. The scroll goes back to its place on the shelf. The cicadas outside have grown quieter still, not winding down entirely, but moving into that late afternoon register where they have come to rest. The summer chorus having receded to a lower and more even sound, a sound that has become simply part of the air, rather than something that rises and falls. Quiet in the room. The boys sit without moving. The tutor pours the second teacup of the afternoon. The tea in the pot has deepened slightly in color. A warmer, richer amber now than the first pour. The compressed tea cake having fully dissolved and given everything it holds to the water. He tilts the pot slowly. The thin arc of liquid, turning in the still air of the study, filling each celadon cup to nearly the same depth as before. He placed the cups before the boys. The elder lifts his with both hands and holds it for a moment, watching the faint steam rise from the surface. The younger drinks immediately. The tutor holds his own cup in both hands and looks towards the doorway where the courtyard garden shows against the late sky. The bamboo canes stand in their places. The basin holds its dark water, cooler and stiller now than in the afternoon's heat. Above the garden wall, the sky has shifted from its afternoon blue towards the pale color of early evening. He drinks slowly. The warmth moves through him and settles. There is nothing that needs doing after this. The lesson is nearly complete. The boys gather their practice sheet from the side of the table, folding them carefully along their established creases, tucking the folded paper inside their cloth-carrying wraps. The elder student checks that his brush is kept. The younger follows his brother's lead without being asked. They bow once to the tutor, a small serious bow, hands at their sides. The tutor returns it, seated, with a slight inclination of his head. The elder picks up the carrying wrap. The younger steps to the doorway, pauses there for a moment in the amber light, one hand resting on the door frame, and then they are both in the courtyard. Their small sandal feet crossing the stone path between the bamboo canes, and then through the gate in the outer wall, which swings close behind them with a quiet, settled sound. The room holds the quiet they have left. 2 empty celadon cups stand at the table's edge. The practice sheets they have completed earlier are still on the drying cloth beside the desk. Neat columns of brushed characters, some careful and correct, some slightly uncertain. All of them evidence of the same patient repetition that makes eventual ease possible. The tutor doesn't move to clear them yet. The study is his own again. He remains at the desk, both hands resting flat on its surface. Outside, the cicadas continue their quieter, even sound, a sound that is now the entire voice of the evening. The day, having given everything else over to the cooling air and the darkening sky. He lights the small oil lamp on the corner of the desk. The flame rises, slowly finding its full height, and then steadies to a warm point of amber light that spreads across the desk surface and reaches the edge of the inkstone and the remaining cup of the tea, now cool in its celadon bowl. He picks up the cup and drinks the last of the cool tea. From the shelf, he draws out the scroll with the vase he has always carried, the narrow roll with the red ribbon tie, not to read it, only to hold it for a moment. The familiar weight in his hands, the dry bamboo surface against his palms. He did not become what he once imagined he would become, but years had not been empty. He became this instead. A man in the study in the evening, a lamp lit, a scroll in his hands, the cicadas outside, the desk swept clean, the scrolls back in their places, and 2 students walking home through the lanes with their practice sheets folded inside their cloth wraps. He slides the scrolls back into its place on the shelf. A faint breeze enters the lattice window. It moves through the window at shoulders high, carrying the cooling air of the garden and the dry whisper of bamboo leaves, and then passes on. The lamp flame holds steady. Tomorrow, the boys will return. The sound of cicadas moves through the evening, soft now, slower, rising very gently, building to a full, even presence that fills the quiet room and the courtyard beyond the doorway, and then releasing again by degrees into something lower and more still. The lamp glows on the writing desk, warm and hurried. Its amber light lies across the surface, across the inkstone at rest in its place, across the empty cups, the smooth river stones the tutor uses to hold the scrolls open. The cicadas continue. Their sound is the sound of late summer evenings in this valley, a sound that has been here longer than the house, longer than the tutor, longer than the dynasty. It belongs to the warm air, and the bamboo, and the darkening hills above the valley. And it requires nothing from the tutor sitting at the desk except to be heard. It rises once more gently, a long, full, even sound, and then it eases. The lamp holds its warm point of light in the room. The scrolls are in their places on the shelf. The courtyard is still beyond the doorway. The bamboo canes, the quiet water basin, the sky above the garden wall are now deep blue of early evening. One cicada sounds, close, just outside the lattice window, and fades. Then another farther off. And then the evening settles entirely into the sound of cicadas and lamplight and warm summer air, moving through the room at its own unhurried pace, asking nothing, completing nothing, simply present in the way that quiet evenings in the old valley always are. The lamp glows, soft, still. The cicadas murmur on. The tutor sits quietly at the end of the day's lesson, the study lamp lit, the scrolls return to their shelf. The summer cicadas continuing their long and hurried chorus through the lattice window as the evening settles gently into the valley. Tonight, we step quietly into the compound of a Tang Dynasty Prefectural Academy, a school where young men lived and studied within the same enclosing walls. And we follow one long winter day alongside a young scholar, from the morning bell to the quiet hour of the dormitory lamp. The day began before dawn. A wooden handbell rang once across the sleeping compound. Then moved through the cold corridors and reached the dormitory rooms, where the students lay beneath their thick quilts. In the dark, cloth sole shoes touch cold floor tiles. Breath rose in small pale clouds near the unlit windows. The scholar splashed water on his face from the ceramic bowl beside his sleeping platform. The water was very cold, the cold of stone in deep winter. He pulled his outer robe around him, tucked his hands inside his sleeve, and stepped out into the covered walkway. The courtyard was still dark. Its flagstones were glazed with a fine frost that caught what little remained of the night sky above the compound walls. Along the far edge of the garden, where a stand of bamboo grew beside the low stone walls, the pale stalks stood perfectly motionless, each one holding its stillness in the cold air, the leaves gathered and unmoving. He crossed to join two other students from his corridor. The taller one from the eastern room, who moved with long, quiet strides, and the younger one, who walked with his hands folded inside his sleeves and his eyes still heavy from sleep. Their breath drifted ahead of them in small pale clouds as they made their way toward the hall. The compound was waking slowly from the dark. Before the first light reached the courtyard, the students gathered in the hall reserved for morning observance. They gathered in 2 rows before the altar shelf, where the name of Confucius, whose teaching formed the heart of their learning, was written on a wooden tablet. A single incense stick burned before it, its thread of smoke rising straight and still. The teacher waited on one side. The students bowed once and then again. No words were spoken. The ceremony was in the stillness of it. After the observance came the morning meal. The students walked into the long room beside the kitchen and took their places at the low wooden tables. Gray ceramic bowls, a simple rice broth with pickled vegetables, warmth rising from the clay pot that the kitchen attendant moved between the rows without sound. The smell of the broth filled the room, a thin, clean warmth against the cold air drifting in from the half-open side door. The scholars ate without talking. Outside, the pale winter light spread slowly across the courtyard tiles. The lecture hall stood at the center of the compound. Its wide doors opened to the inner courtyard. The students walked in and took their places on the low cushion mats, arranged in 2 rows, facing the raised teaching platform at the front. A scroll hung on the wall behind it. A large formal brushwork of characters, steady and even. The opening passage of one of the ancient classics. The teacher began without preamble. His voice was unhurried, reading one line at a time, pausing after each, letting the words settle before continuing. The passage was from the Book of Sounds, the oldest collection of poetry in the classical world. 305 verses, composed by ordinary people across many centuries. Farmers and soldiers, wives waiting at the gate, travelers on cold roads at night. The teacher read the same line 3 times slowly. Then he called upon the students to recite. Their voices together filled the hall in a low, even rhythm. The words moving in a pace that rose and fell like breathing. The sound was not loud. It was the sound of something old and patient being carried forward. Outside the lattice windows, the winter light lay flat across the courtyard stones. The morning continued in its long and hurried way. The afternoon session ended as the light was beginning to soften toward the west. The students came out through the hall doors into the covered corridor, their voices low. The day's study quietly settled in the body. The scholar walked with his 2 companions back across the courtyard. The taller one carrying his sleeve-folded study notes. The younger companion moving with a lighter step. They paused at the edge of the garden without deciding to. The bamboo in the far corner of the compound held its stillness in the winter air. The peeled stalks standing cleanly. The leaves gathered and unmoving against the white sky above the wall. A sparrow briefly landed on the low stone rim of the garden. Pause for a moment, looking across the courtyard, and then flew off. Beyond the outer compound wall, a cart moved on the road outside. The distant creak and grinds of its wheels, carrying clearly in the cold air, and then fading. The scholar stood still for a moment. The afternoon light lay flat and silver across the flagstones. The frost had not yet returned, but the cold was resuming as the sun moved lower. The air sharpening again after the soft warmth of the afternoon. Then the three of them move on towards the evening meal. After the meal, the students return to the study hall on the eastern side of the compound. It is a timber building of 2.5 stories. The tallest structure on this side of the academy. The ground floor and the first floor each held rows of low wooden study tables, oil lamps already set and burning at each place. Above the first floor, a half-story attic ran the full length of the building beneath the sloping eaves. The academy archive. Its wall lined with orderly rack of books and bound scrolls, cool and dim, smelling of old paper and lacquer wood. Students climbed up there to retrieve a text and sometimes remained to read among the stored writing. A lamp sat on the narrow shelf beside the rack. The scholar took his usual place on the ground floor, near the second lamp from the south window. The hall was warmer than the courtyard. The old timber walls held the day's gathered heat well into the evening. From his cloth bag, he drew out the scroll he has been walking through for the past few days. A passage from the Book of Sounds, copied out by a senior student in clear vertical columns on thick paper. He anchored the scroll edges open with 2 smooth river stones and settled to read, letting the hall gather itself around him. The taller student footsteps passed through the entrance and continued up the staircase to the first floor. A soft creak on the third step, then quiet as he found his place above. A little later came the lighter sound of the younger student. Climbing the steep attic ladder, a scroll already tucked under his arm. 3 lamps burned in the building, 1 on each level. Each separate pools of amber light still and even, each contained within its own floor. Below, the scholar at his text. Above him, the taller student at his table on the first floor. And above that, just audible through the old timber ceiling, the faint sound of the younger student settling quietly among the stored scrolls in the archive attic. Outside, the compound has grown quiet. The kitchen sounds had ended. Somewhere near the rear corridor, a door was drawn gently shut. The winter evening had fully arrived now. The study hall held it, floor by floor, lamp by lamp, warm and close and calm. Some time passed. It was difficult to say how much. The scholar had moved through 3 columns of the passage, pausing where the meaning required it, reading certain lines twice, with his finger tracing just above the surface of the paper. The text he was studying described a river crossing in early autumn. The green reeds, the sound of water, the feeling of distance between 2 shores. He had read it before, several times. Each time, something different came forward. The taller student across the room looked up from his scroll. He murmured a line, quietly, half to himself, from one of the poems they had recited that morning in the lecture hall. It was a verse from the Book of Sounds about winter reeds at dawn. The white dew turned to frost at the river's edge. The scholar listened. After a moment, he said, "A good verse for this evening. No more than that." The taller student's gaze moved briefly to the window. The dark courtyard beyond the lattice. The winter dark. And then he returned to his scroll. The younger student had not looked up, though perhaps he had heard. The room drew back into its quiet. The same quiet as before, perhaps a little softer now, for having opened briefly and closed again. The lamps burned on. The scholar continued through the passage. He read without hurry, giving each line the time it needed. His finger traced slowly to the next column. Across the room, the taller student had grown very still. his head lowered in the posture of deep concentration. The younger student had set his scroll down and was resting his gaze somewhere near the lamp flame. With a slightly unfocused look of a mind, gently releasing the hold it had kept on things all day. The lamplight on the nearest table, warm, steady, touching the upper edge of the scroll's paper with its amber glow. The rest of the room receding into the softer dark beyond. From somewhere beyond the outer wall came the night watchman's wooden clapper, a hollow striker beaten twice each hour to mark the time across the sleeping compound. Two soft hollow taps. The sound traveled in the cold air and then was gone. The winter night settled again, even and patient. The lamps kept their quiet flames. The scholar reached the end of the passage. He stayed with the final lines for a moment, not reading, only resting his eyes on the characters as they stood on the page. The verses described the end of a journey. The traveler arriving at evening. The road behind him, and the gate ahead. Nothing more complicated than that. He found that satisfying. One of the river stones was returned carefully to the upper edge of the scroll. The room around him was very quiet. The younger student had folded his hands on the table and was sitting with his eyes half closed. Not asleep, but near something like it. The taller student was still reading, his brush tracing lightly over a line in his own text, making a small mark in the margin. The lamp lay along the lower surface of the nearest ceiling beam in a long even stripe, amber and still. The wood above it worn to a deep brown from years of seasons in this room. The beam absorbed the light and gave it back softly. The scholar looked at it for some time, still warm. Footsteps sounded once in the corridor outside. The library archive monitor making his evening round. A quiet knock on the door frame. He said only, "A few more minutes." The taller student began to gather his things, his scroll rolled and tied, his notes folded, his lamp carried back to the stand near the door. The younger student rose and straightened his robe, tucking his rolled scroll under his arm. The scholar slowly rolled the scroll close, the paper coming together with its quiet resistance. The columns of characters disappearing inside the roll. He set it in his cloth bag and tied the cord. He lifted his lamp and returned it to the stand. The three of them moved out of the library room into the covered corridor. The cold air found them at once. Their breath rose ahead of them in the lamplight as they crossed towards the dormitory wing. The bamboo in the garden corner stood in the dark, motionless. The flagstones were cold beneath their shoes. Above, the winter sky was clear and cold, white above the grey tiles of the compound walls. In the dormitory, the scholar set his bag on the lower shelf beside his sleeping platform and sat for a moment on the edge of his bed. The room was quiet around him. His two companions came to rest without speaking. Robes folded, shoes set neatly beside the sleeping platform, quilt lifted and drawn close. In the corner of the dormitory, on its lower shelf, the night lamp burned. Its flame is very small, barely a warm point of light in the quiet room. But it was enough. It reached the nearest timber wall, just touching the old planking with its amber warmth. And it reached the low ceiling beam above. The dark wood receiving the light evenly along its lower face, returning the same patient glow that the study room lamp had offered all evening. Light on old timber, warm and still. Outside the dormitory window, the courtyard lay in deep winter cold. The flagstones were dark. The bamboo stood pale and silent along the garden wall. The frost was returning now to the stone and tile, settling in the way that frost always settles, quietly, without announcing itself, arriving while no one is watching. The compound was entirely at rest. Inside, the small lamp continued its patient burning. The flame held without moving. The beam above was still. The scholar lay down and drew the quilt up close. The lamplight rested on the timber above, amber and even, as it had rested through all the long sessions of this day. From the vesper frost of the morning courtyard to this final quiet hour. It did not require anything of the man lying beneath it. It only burned and spread its warmth and rested on the old wood the way light rests when everything else has gone still. Warm, soft, and still. And the winter night held the compound, patient and cold and unhurried, exactly as it had held it through all the long seasons of the study before this one. And so the young scholar rests in the winter dormitory as the small lamp burns on its shelf. The compound still and cold around him. The day's verses settling quietly into the memory the way frost settles on stone. Gently and without effort, in the patient hours of the night. Tonight, we step quietly into a mountain monastery in Henan province, where the last autumn light fades behind the pine-covered ridges, and 3 scholars, traveling companions from their prefectural school, bound for Chang'an and the Imperial examinations, settle into a shared guest room after a long day on the mountain road. The sound of evening chanting drifting softly through the trees. The stone road has been climbing for most of the afternoon. It began as a wide, even path through cultivated fields, worn flat from long use. Then the valley narrowed. The fields gave way to scrub and pale grass, and the road grew steeper. Stone steps cut into the slope at the sharpest angles. The surface rough and cold underfoot. The trees thickened. Pine trees mostly. Their upper branches moving the high air with a quiet, sustained sound, like water moving over a shallow bed of stones, perpetual and unhurried, requiring nothing from the travelers below. The 3 scholars have been walking since early morning. Their hem robes are worn and robe darkened at the hem. Each carries a cloth bundle, brushes, inkstone, a scroll of the classic. The weight familiar now after weeks on the road. They walk in near silence. The conversation of the morning long spent. The afternoon given over to the steady rhythm of the climb. They reach the last stretch of stone steps. The pine trees stand closer here. They are dark trunks rising straight and even. They are pine needles making that same unbroken sound above, low and layered, filling the whole air without being loud. The resin smell is strong at this hour, cooled and sharpened by the autumn evening. Faintly, just barely, the sweetness of incense smoke. The monastery gate appears at the top of the steps. A plain timber gate set into a low wall. Its wide overhanging roof dark with age. A single lantern hangs beneath the eave, already burning. A small amber point in the early dusk. Beyond it, through the gap between the gate post, the faint amber glow of the compound. Lanterns appearing one by one along the covered corridors as the last daylight drains from the sky above the ridge. The scholars step through the gate. The elderly monk appears from the inner corridor without being summoned. He is a small man, unhurried as the evening itself. His plain dark robe belt simply at the waist. His feet in cloth sandals that make no sound on the stone path. He presses his palms together and bows slightly towards the scholar. A small, complete gesture, neither warm or cold, simply present, and turns and begins walking. They follow. The monastery compound is modest and orderly. Covered corridors. A central courtyard open to the cooling sky. Pine tops visible above the outer walls. From somewhere behind the main hall, faint and continuous, the evening chanting has begun. Voices falling and rising together in a rhythm that belongs entirely to itself. The monk opens a door at the corridor's end. The guest room is plain and spare, wider than a single traveler's room, with a low wooden table against the inner hall, and a wooden shelf above it. Along the far wall, 3 sleeping platforms of raised timber, a woven mat rolled to one side on each. The wooden shutter stands half open, admitting the cool mountain air and the faint sound of the pines outside. The monk sets a small clay oil lamp on the table. He attaches a taper to it from the lantern he carries. The flame rises, finding its balance, steadying, and the room fills with warm amber light that reaches the earthen walls and the shelf and stops there, the corners remaining in their shadows. The monk bows once more and it's gone. The 3 scholars stand in the lamplight. They lower their bundles from their back and rest them against the wall. Still. The room settles around them. The sound of cloth-soled sandals on the wooden corridor outside, quiet and deliberate, approaches and stops. The door opens. The novice is young, perhaps 14. His robe a darker gray than the monk's. He carries a large wooden tray with both hands and lays it on the low table with a care that comes from practice. 3 clay bowls of millet porridge, peeled and steaming. 3 small ceramic cups of tea. A dish of pickled greens, dark and gleaming. A dish of cold bean curd. He settles everything into place without ceremony and bows slightly toward the scholars, then turns, and his sandals carry him back along the corridor. The sound receding and gone. The 3 sit at the table. Steam rises from the porridge balls in thin, wavering columns. And from the teacups, finer threads carrying the clean scent of dried leaves. They eat in the shared quiet of people who have walked a long day together and have nothing left to explain. The porridge is warm and mild, the simplest thing food can be. Between mouthfuls, they are still. The bowls warm in their hands. The lamplight steady on the table. From outside the compound walls, carried on the still mountain air, the chanting continues. Low and even, patient as the wind in the pines above. The cups are thin and unglazed, plain clay that absorbs warmth and holds it. and the tea is a simple mountain brew, pale gold in the lamplight. Its scent clean and faintly grassy. They drink slowly, without speaking. The warmth moves through them in a long wave. The guest room, the lamp, the whitewashed walls, the sleeping platforms along the far wall. These settle around the scholars with the quiet authority of simple facts. This is where they are tonight. The mountain road has brought them here, as it has brought other travelers before them, and the room receives them without comment. The chanting drifts through the open shutter. A little closer now. The still evening air carrying sound farther as the last warmth of the day leaves the stone walls. The voices rise in their slow measure, reach a point of even fullness, and ease back. And begin again. No resolving phrase, no ending, only the ongoing rhythm, patient and complete in itself. Steam lifts from the cups between sips, thin and slow, rising, thinning, gone. Chang'an, the capital city, is still many days ahead. That distance is tomorrow's concern. Tonight, there is only the cup in the hands, the lamp, the sound the pines make when the mountain wind moves through their needles. The scholars unpack in the unhurried manner of travelers who have done this many evenings now. Brushes on the shelf, inkstone cases beside them, scrolls standing upright against the wall. Their cloth ties loose and familiar. These objects arrange themselves in the wooden shelf with a quiet rightness. Tools finding their temporary home for the night. Between the Prefectural school and the capital, there have been many such rooms, many such shelves. The act of settling them out is itself a kind of rest. One of them crosses to the open shutter and looks out. The pine trees are dark shapes against the sky now, the deep, even blue of full autumn night. Their sound is clear, low and continuous. building in the slow mounting wind and then easing back. He pulls the shutter to leaving only a hand's width open and returns to the table. The chanting from the Buddha hall has shifted. It has been there all evening. A constant presence threading through the cool air. But in the last little while, it has grown quieter. Not in volume, but in intensity. The voices settling into their later register. The one that belongs to the final hour of the evening office. The rhythm is the same. The patience is the same. But something in it has softened, turned inward, become more like breath and less like speech. The scholars sit with their hands in their laps. None of them reads. The scrolls are on the shelf and will stay there tonight. The road has taken the particular stillness that reading requires. What is left is here. This room, this lamp, the remains of the meal at the table's edge, the pine sound coming through the open shutter, wind in the pine needles. The sound builds slowly. All the needles of all the trees surround the compound, staring at once. A layered and intricate sound that is somehow always new, even as it remains always the same. It rises, holds, and then the wind passes on and the needles settle. A quieter sound takes its place. The breathing of the forest between gusts. Only the lamp. The small pine sound at the window. And somewhere behind the compound wall, the chanting easing toward its close. The temple bell sounds. One stroke, low and round. The iron, ringing for a long moment before it, begins to thin and fade. It carries through the mountain air in every direction at once, through the compound walls and the pine trees, and down towards the valley far below in the dark. And then it is gone, leaving a silence that is fuller than the silence before it. The chanting stops. Not gradually, but all at once, present, and then no longer present. The voices have been moving through their long rhythm since evening prayers began are quiet now. What remains is only the sound of the pines, which has been there all along and continues without interruption. Steady, patient, entirely indifferent to the coming and going of human voices. The scholars sit without moving. The monastery's human sounds have given way entirely, and what is left is order. The mountain, the trees, the cold, and the dark. The compound walls are thin between the guest room and all of that. The lamp burns on, warm against the earthen wall behind it. The shelf with its object as they were left. Outside the gap in the shutter, the pines continue, rising, easing, and rising again. No one reaches for a scroll. There is always the pull of it, the classic and their familiar passages. The character long held in memory since boyhood. The sense that an evening not spent in study is an evening given away. All three of them know this feeling. It has traveled with them from home. Tonight it asks, and they let it go. The lamp is still. The pine wind comes and goes at the window. The smooth worn wood of the table. The lamp with its subtle circle of light. The shelf above with the inkstone cases and the scrolls standing against the wall. The wind moves through the pine needles outside. A long, slow sound, building gently and then easing. The meal things go to the small shelf near the door. Bowls stack. Cups beside them. The tray flat beneath. It feels right to leave the room in order. Someone will collect them in the morning. The mats unroll across the platforms. The woven surface is cool and slightly rough under the hands. Tightly woven reed, the kind that will become familiar by morning, but is still a little new tonight. Each scholar smooths his mat flat along the platform's length and folds the spare cloth into a rough pillow at the near end. One of them stands at the table and looks at the lamp. The small flame, even in the still room. The amber light lying across the table and the shelf above. He lowers the wick with 2 careful fingers, pressing it slightly into the clay dish. The flame drops to half its height. The circle of light contracts, pulling back from the shelf and the far wall, until it holds only the table and the lamp itself in its pool of amber warmth. Half dark now. The room is quiet. The pine wind comes. The sound of the pines fills the night. It is the only sound now. The monastery grown entirely quiet. The corridors still. The Buddha hall dark. The monks folded into their quarters and their silence. Nothing moves in the compound. Only the pine trees move. Above the walls, there are thousands of needles turning in the slow mountain wind that comes and comes again through the hours of the night. The lamp glows on the table. Small, warm, and hurried. The pine wind rises. All the trees at once. A full layered sound that enters the room through the gap in the shutter, carrying the coal and the razor-sharp scent of pine. Not a single note, but many notes together. Each needle contributing its small fraction to the whole. And then it eases. The trees settle. A quieter sound takes its place. The breathing of the forest between gusts. And the wind returns, gently, building from a whisper to a full and even hum, and then drawing back into silence. The 3 scholars lie on their mats, eyes closed. The faint warmth of the lamp still present at the edge of the room. The pine wind comes and goes, patient as the night around it, building gently, easing, and then returning, low and even, always returning. And so the 3 scholars rest in the mountain guest room. Their travel bundles settled on the shelf. and the lamp burning low on the table. The autumn wind continuing its long passage through the pine trees around the monastery walls as the night deepens quietly over the mountain. Tonight, we step quietly into a mountain monastery before dawn, where 3 young scholars prepare for the final day of their journey towards Chang'an. The cold morning opens onto frost-peeled fields and a road slowly filling with travelers, until by dusk the grey city walls rise before them, and they pass through the eastern gate into the fading light of the capital city. The monastery gate stands open in the grey of earliest morning. The pine trees on the ridge are barely visible, dark shapes against a sky that has not yet decided what color it intends to be. The air is cold, dry, and sharp, carrying the scent of pine resin and dark stone, and the faint sweetness of incense from somewhere deeper in the compound. The 3 scholars ate before first light. The monk novice brought congee, a warm rice porridge, and they ate it standing in the covered corridor, while the monks' morning chanting rose and fell from the direction of the Buddha's hall. They ate without speaking. There is not much to say at this hour. They collect their bundles by the inner gate. Brushes wrapped in their cloth sleeve, an inkstone, a flat stone for grinding ink, in its fitted wooden case, a scroll of steady text rolled tight and tied. The remaining cakes in their paper wrapper, spare cloth folded flat at the bottom. The weight is familiar now after many mornings on the road. Familiar enough that shouldering it requires no particular thought. The bundle settles. The cloth holds everything in its accustomed place. The elderly monk gives a slight bow as they pass him. The scholars bow slightly in return. The monastery gate swings close behind them with a quiet sound of old timber meeting its frame. And the chanting fades. The road opens before them, and the morning air receives them without command. They walk south. The road descends through pine-covered slopes for the first hour. The stone steps giving way to a packed earth path. The path widening as the tree line thins. They walk in the order that settled itself somewhere in the early days of the journey, not arranged by agreement, simply the order that found them and stayed. It is the same pace as always, deliberate, not slow. The pace of people who have learned to read the road ahead and set their effort accordingly. The bundles ride on their backs. The weight shifts slightly with each step. The cloth holding the objects inside in their familiar arrangement. By mid-morning, it will be possible to forget the bundle is there. By afternoon, it will announce itself again. The plain opens before them as the hills recede. The plain is wide and bare at this season. The fields low and brown. The autumn grain long since harvested. The sky above is high and pure and clear, swept clean by the dry northern wind. Their breath comes out in thin, steady clouds. The road surface, packed earth now, wide and flat, is firm and smooth underfoot. They walk. The rhythm of cloth-soled shoes on packed earth is the sound of the whole morning. By mid-morning, the road has changed. It began as a provincial path and has become something else, wider, better kept, the surface graded and maintained. Flat stones set into the earth where carts would otherwise churn mud. Other travelers have joined it. An ox cart moves slowly ahead. Loaded with bought cloth. A pair of travelers a distance ahead. Their packs smaller than the scholar's own. Then, from behind, a military courier on horseback, coming fast and steady. A dispatch case strapped to his back. Gone before the sound of hooves had finished fading. The scholars step to one side for him without thought. This too is the rhythm of the road. Later, an official's carriage passes in the opposite direction. A lacquered wooden body hung with curtains. 2 attendants riding ahead. Such carriages belong to men who have already taken the examination they are traveling to sit. This thought does not disturb them. It is simply a fact of the road. The camel train appears from the west. 6 camels, loaded hide, led by a man in Central Asian dress, whose deep russet coat is like nothing made in Hunan. The scholars watch them pass. A dry, faintly musky scent lingers on the road after they are gone. The scholars step beside a roadside well when the sun has done what it can to warm the plain and found the day too cold for such ambitions. The well sits beside a stone milepost in a widening of the road, where a few bare branched trees offer something like shelter. The bucket handle is smooth worn wood, dark from many hands. Cold water comes up from the depth in a slow sound of rope and pulley. They drink from the bucket in turn. The water sharp and cold enough to make the back of the throat ache pleasantly. They sit on the lodestone edging of the well and break open the travel cakes. The cakes are dense and plain, compressed dry grain, lightly salted, made to last weeks without spoiling. And the scholars ate them broken into pieces. The texture firm and slightly dusty on the tongue. One of the scholars remarked that he will not eat a travel cake again for some time after they reach the capital. The others agree. The bundles lean against the stone at their feet, still at rest. A dry wind crosses the field to their south, moving the dead stalks at the field's edge. The sky is pale blue of light autumn, cloudless, very high. Far ahead on the western horizon, the air is very slightly darker, very slightly warmer in tone. Chang'an, still far. but closer than it was this morning. They shoulder the bundles and continue their journey. The walls of Chang'an appear in the late afternoon. Not suddenly. The city accumulates. First, a faint, warmer haze on the western horizon, barely distinguishable from natural haze. Then, slowly the dark line of the outer wall. Too long and too regular to be hills, stretching across the plain. Then the gate towers. Rising above the wall line, they form distinct against the pale autumn sky. The three scholars see it at the same moment. None of them speaks. There is nothing that needs saying. They have traveled from Henan province for this. Weeks of mountain road and river crossing and monastery guest rooms and cold early mornings. Now the city is there, visible, no longer a direction. They walked on. City wall grows larger with each half hour. The gate towers take on their details. The tiled roof lines, the layered eaves, the dark openings beneath the arches where the afternoon traffic passes. The road is busier now. Carts returning before the gates close. Riders on horseback. Groups of men on foot moving in the same direction. The sound of the road is fuller. More wheels, more voices, the occasional call of a handler to his animal. The sun is low behind them. There are shadows stretching far ahead across the plain. And above the gatehouse arch, in the early dusk, a single amber point. The lantern already lit, burning steadily against the fading sky. The gatehouse approach is wide and still. The stone pavement, worn smooth by the passage of many thousands of feet across many years. Two gate officials stand at the scholar's side of the arch. The senior of the two is a small man. His robe padded against the evening chill. His manner unhurried in the way of men who have performed the same duty many times. he checks the travel permits. The documents issued by the prefectural office back home, stating each scholar's name, origin, and purpose of travel. Reading them by the light of the gatehouse lantern with a care that is neither suspicious nor perfunctory, simply careful. The lantern above the arch cast a warm glow across the worn stone of the yard. The scholars wait. Their breath rises in thin pale clouds. Behind them, the last of the afternoon light has left the plain, and the sky there has become a deep, clear blue. The travel permits are returned to the scholars. They bow slightly to the officials. The gate official nods once. The scholars pass beneath the arch. The great central avenue of Chang'an opens before them. It is wide, lined on either side with Chinese scholar trees. Tall, pale dark trees, long planted along the great roads of the capital. They are bare autumn branches, making a fine tracery against the dark sky. Lantern poles stand at intervals along the walled wall faces, each burning with its small steady flame, casting overlapping circles of warm light across the paved surface. The walled walls themselves rise on either side. Pale plaster over dark stone foundations, stretching north in their long, orderly lines. The city sounds are different from the road, layered differently, closer, more contained. Wheels on the stone, voices from within a walled wall. The smell of cooking fires, and lamp oil and cold stone. From somewhere to the north, a clear note of a temple bell sounding once and then dissolving. Then, across the city, the walled drums begin, one by one. The curfew drums sound across the great grid of Chang'an. The signal that the walled gates are now closing, and the night has begun. The scholars hear it from several directions at once and walk on. They are inside. The lanterns on the avenue poles burn steady. They are warm light falling soft across the paved road. They leave the great avenue for a narrower lane. A stall keeper, folding cloth by the road, had directed them east, naming an inn near the examination halls. The lane is quiet. Walled walls on both sides. The plaster rough and pale. A lantern burns above a compound gate halfway along. Its warm glow steady in the middle of the lane. Another lantern glows at the far turning. A softer glow there, slightly hazed by the night air. One of them is quiet with something that is not a difficulty. The kind of quiet that comes at the end of a long day, when the body has finished its work, and the mind has nowhere left to hurry. He is thinking of the prefectural school back home. The courtyard with its old scholar tree. The study room where the three of them learned to write by lamplight. The morning they left, and the teacher stood at the gate and said something brief and then went back inside. The lantern at the lane, turning glow amber against the cold stone of the walled wall. The city is very still. The walled drums have finished. The night watchman's wooden clapper sounds twice before the next lane. Two hollow taps marking the watch hour. And then the night settles back into its quiet. The inn is set into the walled wall on the east side of the lane. A plain wooden gate below a wide eave. A lantern in a horn and paper shade burning above the lintel. Its amber light falls across the stone of the lane and rests there, warm, still, and hurried. The scholars stand before it for a moment, the bundles on their backs, carried since the monastery gate, since before dawn, since the chill of the mountain morning, have found their last weight. One of them raises his hand to the door. A young man appears inside and leads them through a narrow corridor to a room with 3 sleeping platforms and a shelf for their things. He placed a small oil lamp on the low table, touches a taper to it from the lamp he carries, and the flame, rises and finds it levels and stays. The scholars lower their bundles from their backs. They rest them against the wall, each one side its own platform. The brushes, inkstone, the scrolls, all of it still. At rest after the long day on the road. The lamp burns on the table, warm and steady in the still room. Through the narrow gap in the wooden shutter, the lantern above the inn doorway is visible, glowing softly in the lane outside. Patient in the autumn night. The city has grown very quiet. From the high window, the sky over Chang'an is clear and deep. The stars, sharp the way they are when the air is dry and the city at rest. The three scholars sit on the edges of their sleeping platforms. The road is still in them, still moving somewhere in their body's memory. The rhythm of cloth-soled shoes on stone, on packed earth, on the wide paved avenue, even though they are still now. The lamp glows on the table. Its small flame is still in the room's air. The warm circle lying quiet across the worn table surface, and reaching the edge of the nearest platform mat, and stopping there. The room's corners rest in their gentle shadow. Through the shutter gap, the inn's doorway lantern burns in the lane, amber against cold stone, warm against the dark. The night settled wide and still around them. The great city of Chang'an quiet in its 100 wards, and the long road behind them. The lamp burning on, soft, steady, still. So the three scholars rest in their room at the inn, their bundles settled against the wall, and the lamp burning quietly on the low table. The long road behind them, and Chang'an spread wide and still around them as the autumn night deepens over the capital. Tonight, we step quietly into a scholar residence in Chang'an, where winter snow falls without wind on grey tile rooftop, and a single oil lamp glows warm in a study at the hour when the wall gates have closed for the night. The curfew drums of Chang'an have already sounded. 2 long rolls of sound, carrying across the 100 words of the capital, as they do each evening. As reliable as the turning of seasons, telling the people of the city that the gates are now sealed. The lanes belong tonight to the cold, to the dark, and to the snow. The snow began sometime in the late afternoon, while the scholar was still at his post in the Monastery building, drawing careful entries in an administrative register by the light of a high bronze lamp. He did not see the first flakes arrive. He only noticed, when he stepped into the stone corridor at the close of the working day, that the courtyard stones were already pale and unmarked. The way stones look when the snow has been falling for exactly long enough to cover everything without anyone having observed it happening. He walked home through the ward lanes, his breath rising ahead of him in small pale clouds, his boots leaving careful prints in the new snow. The ward gate came closed behind him quietly, wood settling against wood, and Chang'an fell into its nightly silence. A million people, tucked behind walls of grey brick and tile rooftop, and paper windows glowing softly with their evening lamps. The scholar is one of them. And tonight, the snow is still falling, quietly, without wind. Each flake finding its way straight down through the cold dark to rest on the grey ceramic tiles above. No sound at all, only the faintest sense of arrival. The courtyard received him without ceremony. A stone pathway, thinly white now, softening the sound of his footsteps to something barely there. Along the east wall, the plum tree stands in its particular way, bare and grey dark against the pale sky, each branch holding a careful line of snow along its upper edge. The scholar pauses at the covered corridor and turns back to look at the courtyard once more. The plum tree, the white pale sweep of the stone path, the lanterns in their horn and paper shades, flames steady and amber behind the thin wild membranes. Snow settling quietly on the grey ceramic roof tiles above. He watches for a long moment, then turns and steps into the corridor. He slides the study door open. The room greets him with warmth, the remnant warmth of the afternoon's charcoal resting in the small iron brazier, and with the familiar smell of the study. Old paper, aged cypress wood, the faint mineral note of an inkstone used daily for many years, and the thin thread of incense drifting from the ancestor niche on the east wall. He removes his outer robe and hangs it on the wooden stand beside the door. He opens the small iron cover of the brazier and adds 2 pieces of charcoal from the wicker basket nearby. Tucking them carefully into place with the iron tongs, the embers take the new wood quietly, a low tick, and settle. He lights the oil lamp on the writing table. The flame rises, slowly at first, finding the wick's full length, and then steadies. Amber light spreads across the low cypress writing desk, across its wound and faintly fragrant surface, across the objects placed on it, with the care of long habit. The inkstone in its rectangular resting place, the water dropper in the shape of a small ceramic fish, the brush rest with 2 wolf hair brushes set carefully across it, the small stack of smooth mulberry paper on the left side. The amber oil lamp glow settles across all of it, evenly and warmly. He settles onto the cushion mat before the table. The night has arrived. Outside, snow falls onto the gray ceramic roof tiles. Its sound too faint to hear. There is nothing now that needs doing except this. He begins with the ink. This is always how the evening begins, when the evening belongs to the brush. From the lower shelf, he draws out the water dropper, the small ceramic fish, pale celadon, its back fitted with a tiny stopper. He removes the stopper and tips the vessel carefully over the grinding surface of the inkstone. 3 drops of water, no more. He watches them land and spread slowly across the gray-green Juan stone, a stone quarried from the far south of the empire, prized for the fineness of its grain, and settle into the shallow depression wound by years of daily use. He returns the small ceramic fish to its place, then takes up the ink stick, a compressed bar of pine soot, and hide glue, its face stamped with a small repeated cloud patterns, its edges worn smooth where his fingers have held it through many hundreds of evenings. He leans the ink stick against the whetstone and begins to grind. The motion is slow and circular, wrist loose, pressure even. the ink stick turning against the fine Chang'an surface with a sound between a whisper and a grace, low, consistent, rhythmic. He does not think while he grinds. There is nothing to think about, only the motion, only the sound, only the ink darkening gradually in the stone's depression. Gray at first, then deeper gray, then the dense black that comes when the grinding has been patient enough. The scent deepens with the ink, pine smoke, something mineral and older, like the stone itself, releasing something it has been holding. He grinds until the ink pools correctly at the stone's lower edge. Then he lays the stick across the inkstone to rest. The lamp flame stands perfectly still. In the brazier, the new charcoal has caught and the room has warmed evenly. Snow gathers along the curved edges of the gray ceramic roof tiles above. He selects the wolf hair brush from the rest, firm and pointed, its bamboo handle balanced exactly right in the hand. He smooths a sheet of mulberry paper flat against the writing surface with the heel of his hand. He draws the tip slowly through the pooled ink. The first character comes down in the form of rain, benevolence, simple in its two-stroke, endlessly adjustable in its expression, depending on the steadiness of the hand, the weight of the ink, the patience of the pause before beginning. He writes it slowly. The entry stroke, deliberate, a pause at the turn. Then a second stroke, longer, opening outward and down. The brush lifts clean. The ink glistens on the pale paper. Catching the amber white lamp glows on its wet surface, and then settles to its true black. He writes the second character, the third. He is copying a passage from the Annals of Confucius, a text he has known since boyhood. Its sentences part of the inner furniture of his mind, as familiar as the shape of this study or the weight of this brush. Each character receives its own pause, before and after. A moment of preparation, a moment of observation. Between strokes, the room exists in its own quiet way. The lamp burning steady. The snow lying quietly across the gray ceramic roof tiles beyond the window. The brazier breathing its even warmth. He pauses after the sixth character and rests the brush across the inkstone edge. He looks at what he has written. Each character slightly different from the others, as they always are. Rain, benevolence. opens slightly differently in lamplight than it does by daylight. He has noticed this for many years and has never entirely decided why. He takes up the brush again. By the time he reaches the final character of the passage, his breath has slowed to the rhythm of the brush movement, a rhythm he did not choose and cannot quite name, but recognize from long practice. He puts the brush down. The completed column rests on the pale paper. The lamp flame does not waver. Outside, snow waits on the gray ceramic roof tiles in its patient, soundless way. When the second sheet is complete and drying beside the first, he turns his attention to the brazier, the clay teapot, small and glazed. Its surface, dark from years of use, sits on a low stone slab beside the brazier iron frame. He fills it from the ceramic water vessel on the lower shelf, the water pouring with a low, contained sound. He lowers the pot onto the trivet over the coals. He waits. Tang Dynasty tea requires patience. He does not stand over it. He sits back on his cushion and allows his hand to rest in his lap and watches the brazier low amber light from a comfortable distance. The room is warm now. The amber oil lamp glow on the writing table falls steadily across the drying sheets of calligraphy and across the inkstone with its pooled ink still dark and usable. He has time. There are no further obligations tonight. The clay teapot sits on the trivet. The first sign is warmth, rising from the narrow spout. Then, the very first movement inside the pot, small bubbles, no longer than fish eyes, rising in ones and twos. Not ready yet. The scholar watches. The room is very still. Then the second stage arrives. Bubbles rising in a continuous stream. The water beginning to murmur to itself. He opens the small ceramic jar on the shelf beside the cup. Inside, a compressed stick of tea cake from Sichuan. Its scent earthy and deep, even before it touches water. A careful piece breaks free with the iron tool. A clean break, not a rough break. He drops the piece into the waiting cup and pours in a slow, controlled arc. Steams rises. The tea cake piece breaks apart in the hot water, unfurling slowly. The color of the liquid changes. First, pale, then amber, then a deep warm brown. The smell fills the study, earthy, faintly sweet. The compressed warmth of autumn hillsides arriving in the middle of winter. The scholar holds the celadon cup in both hands, warm against his palms. He sipped once. The warmth travels through him and settles quietly in his chest. A second sip. He lowers the cup to the table's edge. There is no hurry for the rest of the cup. He puts the cup down and simply listens. The evening has reached the hour when Chang'an's hounds have mostly retired. From somewhere in the lane, beyond the compound wall, distant but distinct, comes the measured report of the ward watchman's wooden clapper. 2 pieces of hardwood struck together. A brief silence. Then again, farther away now. Moving through the lanes at his patient and hurried pace, circling the ward as he does every night, telling the sleeping residents of Chang'an by his presence and his timing that all is well, that the curfew holds, and the night contains nothing requiring waking. The scholar listens as the clapper moves away, growing smaller, until the sound is barely sound at all. Only the faint memory of hardwood that his ears hold for a moment, longer than it was actually present. Then silence. The deep, complete silence of a winter night in the capital city, Chang'an. 1 million people, all quiet. A vast white weight of snow on tile and stone, wall and tree, holding everything in place. Then, much later, from the south of the city, where a monastery stands on a low rise above the rooftop, a single bronze bell tone, deep, rounded. Arriving through the cold night air with a strange clarity, the tone stretches outward, expands, then begins its slow decline, diminishing the way ripples decline on still water. Each ring wider and thinner until the sound can no longer be heard and only its absence remains. Outside the paper window, snow is still falling. He can see its motion in the narrow gap left at the window's edge, a thin column of visible cold air, blue-gray in the darkness, with flakes crossing it in their unhurried way. Snow presses quietly on the curved gray ceramic roof tiles above. It has been falling for hours now. The celadon cup has grown cool. He lifts it once more, holds it a moment longer, then rested on the table edge. The room holds everything the evening has made. 2 completed sheets of calligraphy drying on the writing surface. The inkstone with its subtle pool of black. The spent teapot cooling on its trivet. The amber oil lamp glow on the writing surface falls across all of it. With the uncomplicated warmth of fire, doing what fire has always done. The scholar does not press the evening forward. There is nothing left to press. The ward is sealed, the watchman is gone, the bell has faded. Only the snow remains. Rest on the grey ceramic roof tiles above, gathering along each curved edge in its patient way. He closes his eyes for a moment. The brazier breathes its slow, even warmth. The room is still. The scholar remains where he is, on the cushion mat, hands resting. The familiar objects of the study are present at the edge of his awareness: the brush rust, the waterfish, the inkstone, each in its place like the words of a passage he no longer needs to consult, because it has passed from memory into something deeper. The plum tree is out in the cold, its branches bearing their careful lines of white with the patience of things that do not need to hold anything, that simply are what they are. The world is quiet. Between the sounds that have come and the sounds that will come later, there is only the compound, the lamp, and the snow. Snow still lies across the grey ceramic roof tiles above, soft and patient in the dark. He leans back slightly on his cushion. His hands rest in his lap. The day's work is done. The evening practice is done. The lamp frame stands small and amber beside the writing table, the last warm point in the room. Its light not quite reaching the scroll on the upper shelf, not quite touching the far wall. The room has grown smaller with the deepening hour, its corners softening into shadow. Snow traces every curved tile edge above in unbroken white. He does not move to extinguish the lamp yet. There is something right about letting it remain, burning quietly, doing what it does. In the room he has used for many evenings now, his shoulders have released into the cushion behind him. The world outside the scholar's compound has been still for a long time. The amber oil lamp glow rests on the writing table, steady and hurried. The small flame does not waver in the still air of the study. It simply burns, as it has been burning since the scholar lit it at the beginning of the evening, drawing warm amber light outward across the dust-worn surface, across the dry inkstone, across the empty brush rest. The glow settles in the room, warm and patient. Snow blankets each gray tile in the same quiet, patient way. The plum tree holds its careful white lines beyond the window. The brazier breathes its even warmth beside the table. The room is still. The flame burns in the quiet air, soft, still. Its amber light spreads across the clear writing surface, across the lacquer box that holds the evening's calligraphy, across the pale paper window, catching its warmth from the inside. The lamp glows in the silent study. And so the scholar sits quietly in the lamplight, the evening complete around him, the snow still gathering on the gray tiles above in its patient and unhurried way. The world we visited tonight is quiet now, and you are here again, in the comfort of your room. Your mind can rest, your body can relax. If you are already drifting into sleep, allow yourself to sink deeper. If you are still awake, simply listen to the quiet. Thank you for joining me at Soothe Quiet Sleep. I'll be here again soon to share another peaceful moment in time. But for now, sleep well. Good night.